Hello everyone. I hope everybody can hear me. These things when you're trying to hold your own screen, it becomes very difficult sometimes. Please give me a thumbs up if you can hear this. I hope everybody can hear me. I've got quite a few questions from some of the people that I wanted to go through. So if you can hear me, just give me a thumbs up, and then we can start this live stream and make sure that everybody else can at least hear what I'm trying to say. Fantastic. It looks like I'm back and I'm alive and it's working. I hope, fingers crossed. Just one thumbs up, guys, if you can hear this. Now, I've been taking note of some of the questions that have already heard from some of the guys, some of the questions that people are already asking. Thank you very much for the thumbs up, guys. I think that's a brilliant thing. I'm glad that you guys are able to hear me properly. I'm gonna read out some of the questions that I've got here, guys, and I'll keep going back to some of the ones that maybe I might not have had a chance to look at yet. So I've tried to take a few screenshots of some of these questions on my side. So I think the first question that came up was actually saying, how do you switch jobs, especially if you do not have enough experience for the job you want to apply for? I think this one, I've addressed it in my previous videos, and I see clearly somebody wants me to readdress it again. But switching jobs, guys, it's one of those things where my advice to everybody else is that it's always sometimes easier to switch jobs in your current role or in your current company. Now, and especially if you're saying if you do not have enough years of experience, what happens is that if you do get an opportunity to actually get a role within your current company, it is easier because they know you, they know what you're capable of, and sometimes they're a bit more forgiving when it comes to the ability to be able to say, yes, we think you'd be the right person for the next role. So that's why I'm saying it's always much better to try by all means to ensure that you try and switch jobs in your current company. The second thing is, when it comes to switching jobs, one of the other things that you guys need to do as well is to try by all means to make sure that you study. I mean, there's courses that you can do on Udemy, there's courses that you can do on LinkedIn Live as well. So I mean LinkedIn Learning. So once you get that opportunity, go and rather learn in some of those, especially if you don't have the experience, and then come back to your employer and say to them, listen, I've been trying to learn about this thing, and I'd like an opportunity to actually be able to to play around and see if I can do this. So that's how you change jobs. Try and change it in your current company, because it's very difficult to change it in a new company, especially if you don't have enough experience. The next question was, when I apply for 2 or 3 positions that I've experience in at the same company, does it hurt my chances of being considered for even one? The answer is not necessarily hurt your chances. The only difficulty that comes in is sometimes you might have experience in them, but sometimes they're completely different positions. Now, if they're very, very different positions, it's the biggest question that people are going to ask you is to say, you've applied for these 2 roles. Why have you applied for both of them? Couldn't you pick one? And you need to be able to explain why you decided to actually apply for both roles. What's also very difficult as well is that you need to actually have a compelling reasons as to why the 2 opportunities are speaking mostly to you. So explain to the interviewers as to why the 2 roles have come up. Now, the tricky question that normally comes up is that people will then say, what if we were to offer you either one of the roles? So you could be interviewing for, let's say, a portfolio manager versus a business development manager. And then they say to you, if, for example, we both offered you a business development manager versus a portfolio manager, which one would you pick and why? Now, that's what normally happens if you apply for 2 roles in the same company. So I would say sometimes also speak to the line managers of those those 2 roles individually, to try and understand first what exactly do the roles do before you actually just apply. Because what then happens is that you apply for it, sometimes the same manager, and then the same manager keeps on seeing you for 2 different roles, and they're like, but we interviewed you just now, and they don't know how to deal with you at that time. So it might be best to have a chat with the line manager before you apply, considering that it's the same company that you're working for. But if it's a different company, then also, once again, it is okay to apply for it, as long as you don't apply for 100 roles just for the sake of applying. The next one was, I think this one I'm going to combine it with the next one, which said, how do you grow within one company and not to keep changing jobs in order for you to get a better salary? And then the second one that I wanted to combine here, it says, how do I use a job offer from another company to negotiate the salary increase, position change at my current job? Now, I'll answer the second one first. I think every recruiter that will hear this is probably cringing at this stage to say, you know, there's nothing worse than people getting counter offers, because the worst thing about a counter offer is that, you know, it's time and money basis, and you should be very careful that you don't try and use another company to get a counter offer, because what then happens is that you might tarnish your opportunity in that company that you might have wanted to be in for the future. So be very careful that you don't do that. The second thing is, you never use your current employer's salary to try and get a better, or you never use the new employer to try and get a better salary at your current employer, because sometimes the assumption is your current employer should value you enough to be able to hopefully increase your salary without you having to bring a counter offer. But if it gets to that stage where you're now looking and you now want to actually leave, it's very advisable that you have a conversation with your line manager to say, listen, I'm actually almost already in the market because I think financially I'm actually stretched and I don't have enough money, and this is what I'm struggling with. That for me is my best advice that I'll give you, is that sometimes have a conversation to say, before you apply, highlight some of the things that are an issue to you, which could be money, which could be working conditions, whatever it is, and inform them that you're actually now starting to look for roles in the market before they get blindsided. And then as for growing within the company, I think also, once again, I think what we also then do sometimes is that we don't speak out enough as employees to say, you know, I've reached a stage in my career where I feel like I'm no longer learning new things, I'm stagnating, I'm not moving up in my career, and this is what I'm actually worried about. So in that instance, it's very important that you actually speak to your line manager about that. And once again, the two speak about salary increases. Once you can't try and use another company to get a counter offer, because you'll be in a lot of trouble, especially if both of them don't bite. And also you might end up being given a counter offer, and then the current company then, you know, because they know that you're already looking, start giving you a lot more smaller roles and smaller responsibilities. You get frustrated, and then you go struggle to find another job somewhere else. And then one of the ones that I got was saying, how does one stay excited about their job over a period of 2 years? Job hopping is not cool on the CV. Now, we always say, if you're reaching a stage where you're saying you need to leave a job every 2 years, it might not necessarily be a career. It might actually just be exactly that, a job. And if it's a job, sometimes you might want to find something that actually speaks directly to you and who you are and what you actually like to do. So in that instance, I wouldn't say, you know, you should be worried about having been there only for 2 years. So in this instance, I'd rather say, try by all means to then make sure that you identify what you like about your current job for those 2 years first. And once you've identified, then it's a lot easier to then say, okay, cool, this is what I've identified, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'll at least be happy with for the next 5 years. Because the better you do in your current job, the more likely that your line manager might give you opportunities to actually keep trying to get new things and try new things and all these things. So that's why I'm saying it is very important that before you get to that stage where you're starting to question why you should stay in the same job every 2 years, then I think you might have to have a conversation with your line manager to say, listen, I'm actually reaching a stage where I'm bored, or I need to actually challenge myself. And then the next one was, how do I negotiate for a much higher salary in my next job? This one also, I think I did try to cover a bit of it in my last conversation, guys. So negotiating your salaries is sometimes very important in understanding what are you trying to negotiate. Because sometimes you'll find that in your current role, they're giving you everything that you need. You've got all the benefits that actually make up what they call a RAM model for that particular company, and those rewards end up adding up. And it's sometimes very important that if you're looking for another vacancy or another opportunity, that you then understand your own worth to say, okay, this is what I've been doing over the last couple of years, and based on a bit of research that I've done online, I know people around this area are earning this much. And then because this one also goes back to the question about, what are your salary expectations? And I think the way I addressed it the last time, guys, was to say, when somebody asks you that, one of the simplest ways to answer it is to say, because I'm not sure of what your reward policy is about or what it actually covers and what it caters, I'm unable to actually give you a much more better answer at this stage, because up until I know exactly what you're looking for and what you pay your employees on, I don't know whether you subsidize their lunch, I don't know if you don't cover the transport, I don't know what you cover. So it's always good to tell people in advance to say, because I don't know enough of that information, I'm not in the right position to actually give you an answer when it comes to that one. And then I'm just going to scroll down a bit, guys, while we're still doing this. And then one of the questions says, how do you approach HR as an internal applicant about hiring procedures where positions have been filled, but not all internal applicants got a chance to present themselves? So I think it deals with a topic that I also covered a while ago, where I said sometimes you meet the minimum requirements. Meeting the minimum requirements does not necessarily mean that you are the most qualified individual for that particular role. Sometimes you'll find that 100 people have applied for the same vacancy. Out of 100, 10 of them have got the exact requirements that the company is looking for, and out of the 10, the extra 6 or so of them have even done that job in that same company or previously or in another company. In that instance, when it comes to screening, a recruiter is more likely going to say, let me put in the first 6 first before I go pick up the other guys that have also applied for the role. So, and you might find that out of the 6, then the best qualified individual out of those 6 is one of them. So that's what would normally happen in some instances. But I think based on your question, what I would say is, it's okay sometimes to go ahead and just ask, to say, guys, listen, as my HR, I've applied for this role, I didn't hear anything, because there's sometimes a reason why you were not selected for that particular role. And that's why it's very important that you actually just go ahead and ask the people to say, I need to understand what could have gone wrong. And then hopefully they'll help you with that one. And then the other one is, how do I get recognized when applying to corporate without corporate experiences? I'm coming from an agency background. So I'm assuming agency background, you're talking about marketing and consulting agency background, not necessarily recruitment agency background. Now, the easiest way to actually answer that is, your CV is very important in how you structure it. And this is how I always say you should actually structure your CV. Number one, when it comes to your CV, sometimes before you apply for a vacancy, especially if you're coming from an agency background, look at what the role is looking for. What exactly are they looking for from your side? Are they looking for somebody that's done campaigns? Are they looking for somebody that's done this? Don't keep a generic CV if you're coming from the outside trying to move into corporate. If it's too generic, it doesn't speak to what they're looking for. So the easiest thing that you can do for yourself now is, in that instance, make sure that you then take highlight a lot of the things that they're asking for in that job spec. If you have only done them, please don't highlight stuff that you haven't done. So highlight it if you have done it. If you've done some of those things, highlight some of those in your CV to make sure that it actually catches the person's attention. Because what we normally do as recruiters is, the role is looking for specific things. If we can't find it on your CV, it becomes very difficult. Yes, in most cases, we can assume that you're coming from a marketing consultant and events background, so you would have done 1 or 2 other things. But the ones that are actually very important, if there's tools that are required, highlight those so that people are aware that you've actually played around with those tools. For me, that's how I'd actually answer that one. Talks. And then the next one that we were saying, it says, when you've applied for a position and you feel strongly about it, is it fine to immediately contact the recruiting officer and express my wish to be considered for the interview? Now, the reality about this one is that when you feel strongly about a vacancy, just know that there's another probably another 20 or 30 people that feel strongly about the same vacancy. So you find that in most cases there's another 50 people that have also applied for the same role, and they're all feeling very strongly about. So sending a recruiter a message to say, hey, listen, I think I'm the perfect person for this role, does not always mean that the guys will be able to actually consider you for the role, because there's 100 other guys that are doing exactly the same thing that you're doing. So just make sure that if you're applying for a vacancy, you highlight exactly what you want that vacancy to highlight, because that way then the people, you'll always stand out regardless of whether you speak to the recruiter or you don't speak to the recruiter. And then a few people being special. And then the next one was you got asked of what would move you. You state the amount, offer comes half but higher than the current. What do you do? I think I tried to cover it earlier, guys, where people always ask you about salary expectations. And yes, salary expectations is a very personal thing. People do things very differently. You know, if somebody was to ask me what's my expectations, I could tell them that I think I should be earning 3 million rands because of whatever reasons. But at the end of the day, normally companies are using benchmarks, and because companies are using benchmarks, then what happens is that they'll still consider your what you've asked for, but they'll then still go back to the benchmarks and saying, based on our benchmarks, has what this man asked for make sense? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? If it doesn't make sense, then they'll then focus still on the benchmarks. And sometimes, yeah, you might think that you've outshot and outdone yourself and it's too high, and then you get to realize, actually no, but listen, we can still do more, and then the companies actually do a bit better. So yeah, in this instance, there's been instances where the company has outdone the candidate, or sometimes, yes, it's not as per what you expected. And then one of the other things says, what are the chances of getting an opportunity of a career change from a different company if your current company is not willing to help you transition? Does studying help? Studying helps where it's not too far from what you want to do. Like, it's the same as if you're a merchandiser in a company and you want to become a portfolio manager. Studying is not going to help you in that instance, because you might need to start from the bottom. The other thing that I think I loved from one of the guys that responded to a video that I posted a while ago, especially about this one, was he said, when you want to change careers or you want to change jobs into a completely new career, be willing to take a salary cut and start from the bottom. Because what people tend to do is they tend to say, I'm already earning 600,000 and I want to change your career, and you're saying, but you don't have experience. So the option that we can give you is to give you an opportunity to be here. And because we're giving you this opportunity and you don't have the experience, we'll still consider you as if you're a junior, because in that instance, you are a junior. Now, you should be willing, if you really want to change your career, to literally take a salary cut. If you're not willing, then it's going to be difficult, because you can't expect somebody to pay you 1 million rands and you're still at the beginning of your career in that particular industry. How come I do not get shortlisted when applying for jobs that I'm qualified for? I think this one, as I said, guys, is that it's not that just because you qualify doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't other people that also qualify. So South Africa, fortunately or unfortunately, is one where there's opportunities that are out there and everybody's trying to take on the same opportunity. And you might find that in some instances, you are one of 50 people that qualify exactly for the same role. And then that's when a lot of people now look a lot more into detail to say, what tools has this person used? What tools have they not used? And then they do the screening used on the tools. So it's not that people are actually hating you and they don't want to shortlist you. Unfortunately, sometimes you'll find that there's 100 other people that qualify for the same job, and that's what normally happens. Then they will just pick on the few that they can actually go through, and then make sure that they interview the ones that are closest, like closest to the current vacancy that you're looking at. How does one prepare for an interview where you don't meet all the requirements? Do you prepare based on the CV? Because the basis of this shortlisting is based on the research. And then do you research the role, risk being incorrect, as you may lack the practical and technical knowledge as you might have. So guys, the easiest way to prepare for anything, if you get shortlisted for a role that you don't meet all the requirements, fantastic. I mean, celebrate that, pat yourself on the back, because it's a great thing. Now, the best way is to make sure that, number one, you research the company, do a lot of research about the company. Number two, research the role itself and some of the areas that you think you're missing on your current profile. And then what's even more important is to make sure that there's certain questions that people ask you, relate them to your current job. The biggest mistake that a lot of people make is to say, if somebody asks you a question about something, they speak about exactly only what the job is asking for. So for example, if I say to you, your client management experience, you're a portfolio manager, so you want to apply for this as a junior portfolio manager, tell us about your client management experience. Now, if you don't have experience as a portfolio manager and you haven't done client management experience in the portfolio management space, speak about your other client management experience that you've got that is outside of this thing. Always make sure that you give examples of your current role versus the role that they're using. So that way you're always like a step closer, because then what you then do is you're saying to these guys, listen, I might not have the exact technical skills that you're looking for, but what I've got is these basic training and basic background, and if you give me the opportunity, I'll be able to actually come and run with the role. The next one is it advisable to speak to your company about creation of a new role that you would like the company to consider? Fantastic. I think that'll be brilliant. So the other thing that a lot of people don't do, guys, in your current companies is you identify an opportunity, and then people don't run with it. You then wait for somebody to go and create that opportunity to say. So in that instance, if you find a gap, because I think one of the nice things about companies, if you look at banks or if you look at all these fintech companies that are coming up, they're solving a problem, they're solving a gap. They're not necessarily speaking about solving a specific, it's a societal gap that they're trying to fix. If you look at what Amazon did, I mean, we speak a lot about Amazon and what it's done to make sure that, yes, it's not really a proper retail business, but it's one of the biggest businesses in the world. But what they've done is to make sure that as a book company that started as a book company, they've taken over the retail industry like with a storm. And that's mainly because they went to fix a specific societal need. And for me, I'd say, Sivile, if you have an opportunity to actually go and say, guys, as a line manager X, I've identified this, I think we can be able to do this. Put together a nice business case, present it to your line manager and say, this is what I think we're missing out, and see what they do. Most cases, most people are excited when you come up with new ideas. So be creative about it and go ahead. How do you negotiate for a position that is paying commission to one that does not? I'm not sure about this one, because I think if a position that's paying commission is a position that's paying commission, it's very difficult to try and negotiate for non-commission if that position requires you to actually have to be paying commission, because sometimes it's the rep structure that's been agreed for that particular role, and the expectations for delivery by that team is that they will be commission based, and that's where also introspection comes in for yourself, where you need to decide to say, listen, am I a salesperson? If I'm a really, really strong salesperson, I would love a commission based role, because that means I can make plenty of money. If I'm not a commission-based person or I'm not a salesperson, then why on earth would I even try and do that? So run away. Why do recruiters and hiring managers not tell the truth and say they'll get back to the candidate, and especially when you realize you've not been successful? I think this one was a question that one of my friends, Gugu, actually asked a while ago, or actually it might have been Peter. So the reason why sometimes people struggle with this is that recruiters are just like any other person. They sometimes struggle with giving bad feedback, especially when they know that the person is not the right candidate, or the person did not get shortlisted. I mean, shortlisted, they're easy to tell you, not shortlisted. But once they build that relationship, because remember, the recruitment is a relationship business. Once they build that relationship, they've done the courtship, they've had the coffee with you, they've had these things. Sometimes giving you the bad feedback is like, oh, it's tough. It's tough not because they're trying to do anything bad, but it's one of those tough things. And I do agree we should, as recruiters, give a lot more feedback to a lot of the candidates. But the reality is, it's a tough thing to give people bad news. Like, it doesn't matter whether you've never known that person for 20 years or whatever, or you just met them. it is very difficult to give bad feedback, but your ask is very relevant, Tshiketani, and for me the ask is, yes, let's try and give feedback, guys, and hopefully we'll be able to help everybody else. Left with 5 more minutes, guys. I'm gonna try and summarize some of the questions. I'll try and put in a bit more time, because I think what I want to do next is I'm gonna get a few more people to try and interview them for some of these questions, and then you guys can shoot all these questions. This is a bit more exciting. My first live screening, top of the morning once again. And then it says, I graduated, got a job as a fund accountant. However, I'm enjoying my job, and I want more financial accountant role. But because I've been working for 2 to 3 years, no graduate program will accept me. How do I motivate for grad or intern positions? Sometimes, because you've been a fund accountant for such a short time, it's not the longest. 2 years is actually reasonable enough. What I would say is, try and apply for roles where you're actually looking at the financial accounting side, instead of the trying to apply for a grad program, because a lot of the time the grad program is that opportunity for people that literally just finished university, and let's give them the opportunity to actually get those roles. For me, I would say try by all means to try and at least go into applying for the same type of roles, but this one we can maybe chat offline. You can send me a message later, and then we'll talk about that. And then one of the last few questions, guys, it says, why do recruiters and hiring managers ask for how much one is getting at their current job before they themselves can table the offer? So the reasons why people always ask for salary pay slips is twofold. Number one, there's always been a requirement from an audit point of view to say we need to make sure that just because what people don't realize about the pay slips is that pay slips are for governance purposes. In some cases in the past, pay slips were not the most important things, and people used to never ask for pay slips. And then people then realized that in the environment that we work in, you need to be able to always explain why candidate X went and got 1,000% increase versus candidate Y who applied for the exact same job. Because what people then don't realize is sometimes you'll find that there's 2 candidates, they've applied for the exact same role. And because they've applied for the same role, somebody then applies, or somebody then ends up giving the one 1,000% increase, and the other one gets a 5% increase. From an audit and governance point of view, you need to be able to look at these 2 people and say, they have the same experience, they have this, why is this one getting a lot more than the other one? And be able to actually call that leader into order. What's with this first and second interviews? First and second interviews are for you as well. So remember, you're interviewing the company, and you need to make sure that you take the opportunity to interview those guys. Get who they are, understand what they offer, and make sure that you understand what they're all about. It's not about the company, it's also about you. So just always remember that first and second is not about the company, it's just about you. When writing a cover letter, how long should the cover letter be? Guys, cover letters, if the company asks for a cover letter, then you can put together a cover letter. If they don't ask, please don't put together a cover letter, because recruiters sometimes have got so many vacancies that they're working on that they don't get to read all cover letters. Cover letters should be at least a maximum of 2 paragraphs of about maybe 5 to 6 sentences each, and that's it. Please do not go and write a full-page cover letter. That doesn't add value to anybody, because nobody's going to read that. And then, guys, I think I'm seeing some of the questions. I'll try and answer them as quickly as I can. 2 more minutes to go. I changed roles from a team leader to a FinOps to a junior accountant. I've recently rejected after the second interview as being too senior for an accountant role. I think it depends on what that role was looking for. And yes, sometimes you've reached that stage where they know that you might even be more senior than the hiring manager, and it's not a bad thing. If you sometimes are more senior than the hiring manager, you don't want to sometimes take on that opportunity, because you might end up frustrating the hiring manager, or you might end up frustrating yourself. Thank you very, very much, guys, for an awesome time. Top of the morning once again, Tshidi here, and I'll organize to interview a few other people. And thank you very much for listening, and let's keep in touch. Cheers.